In a single night, the most powerful army of the ancient world was reduced to a field of corpses. There was no battle, there was no resistance, there wasn't even a war cry. 185,000 elite soldiers, veterans of countless conquests, warriors who had subdued entire nations, simply never woke up. The year was approximately 701 BC, and the place the surroundings of Jerusalem. The Assyrian Empire, under the command of the feared Sennacherib, had built the most efficient war machine the world had ever known. Their siege techniques were unbeatable, their tactics of terror legendary. Their soldiers, trained from childhood, formed a professional army that knew no defeat. But that night, something extraordinary happened, something that would alter the course of history and echo through millennia. A supernatural intervention so precise, so devastating, that even the Assyrian records, known for their military propaganda, could not entirely conceal it. This is the story of how the God of Israel confronted the most powerful empire of its time. A narrative intertwining faith, politics, warfare, and the supernatural. A tale that compels us to ask, what happens when human pride dares to challenge divine power? The history of the Assyrian Empire is one of the most impressive and terrifying in the ancient world. From the banks of the Tigris River, in what we now know as Iraq, arose a civilization that would forever transform the art of war. As the book of Isaiah, chapter 10, verses 13 and 14 recounts, the king of Assyria himself boasted, saying, "By the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasures. Like a mighty bull, I brought down their inhabitants. As one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As people gather abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries, and no one flapped a wing or opened their mouth to chirp." The Assyrians became a superpower through revolutionary military innovations. They were the first to create a permanent, professional army, an unprecedented concept in an era when most nations relied on farmers who dropped their tools to fight only during times of war. The Assyrians developed advanced siege weapons, including mobile towers and covered battering rams, capable of demolishing the strongest walls of their time. But perhaps their most effective weapon was psychological terror. As seen in 2 Kings, chapter 18, verse 27, they did not hesitate to use brutal threats. Assyrian envoys would openly describe the suffering awaiting those who resisted, stating that people would be forced to eat their own filth and drink their own urine. When Sennacherib ascended the Assyrian throne, he inherited this war machine and perfected it further. Historical records found in Nineveh, his capital, reveal an extraordinarily organized military system. Training began in youth, with brutal exercises that turned boys into relentless soldiers. The army was divided into specialized units: archers, cavalry, heavy infantry, and siege engineers, each with a distinct battlefield role. As told in 2 Kings, chapter 18, verses 19 to 25, Sennacherib's arrogance matched his military might. His messengers mocked other kingdoms, asking, "On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have strategy and military strength, but it is only talk. On whom are you depending, that you rebel against me?" Sennacherib's campaign against the Western nations was devastating. Like an unstoppable wave, the Assyrian army swept through the region. As recorded in 2 Kings, chapter 17, verses 5 and 6, they had already conquered the northern kingdom of Israel years earlier. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. The wealthy Phoenician cities, renowned for maritime trade, fell one after another. The Philistines, ancient enemies of Israel, were subdued. The path to Egypt seemed inevitable, and Judah stood directly in the path of this military juggernaut. As described in 2 Kings, chapter 18, verses 13 to 16, terror finally reached Jerusalem's gates. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. The destruction was systematic and relentless. City after city, fortress after fortress, the Assyrians proved why they were deemed invincible. Panic spread across Judah. Refugees from the conquered cities flooded into Jerusalem, bringing horrifying stories of Assyrian brutality, as described in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 1 to 8. King Hezekiah tried to prepare the city for the inevitable siege, fortifying walls, storing supplies, and organizing defenses. Attempts to form alliances with other nations, particularly Egypt, proved futile. As Isaiah had warned in chapter 30, verses 1 to 3, "Woe to the obstinate children, declares the Lord, to those who carry out plans that are not mine, forming an alliance, but not by my spirit, heaping sin upon sin, who go down to Egypt without consulting me, who look for help to Pharaoh's protection, to Egypt's shade for refuge. But Pharaoh's protection will be to your shame. Egypt's shade will bring you disgrace." The situation seemed utterly hopeless. The world's greatest empire, with its professional army of 185,000 men, camped around Jerusalem. Their siege machines were visible from the city walls, and their soldiers, veterans of hundreds of battles, awaited only the order to attack. As reported in 2 Kings, chapter 18, verse 17, Sennacherib sent his supreme commander, the Tartan, his chief officer, the Rabsaris, and his field commander, the Rabshakeh, with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. The Assyrian messengers positioned themselves near the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washer's field. And there began one of the most extraordinary episodes in biblical history. Before the Assyrian threat became imminent, Hezekiah had already begun a profound spiritual reform in Judah. As we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 3 and 4, "In the first month of the first year of his reign, he opened the doors of the temple of the Lord and repaired them. He brought in the priests and the Levites, assembled them in the square on the east side." This was not a superficial reform. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 3 to 6, the Bible tells us, "He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands the Lord had given Moses." The purification of the temple was thorough. In 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 15 to 17, we see that the Levites spent 16 days cleansing the temple, removing everything impure. Sacrifices were restored with great joy, and the Levitical service was reorganized according to the original instructions given by David. One of the highlights of this spiritual reform was the celebration of the Passover. In 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verses 1 and 5, it is written, "Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah, and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, inviting them to come to the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel." They decided to send a proclamation throughout Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, calling the people to come to Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. It had not been celebrated in large numbers according to what was written. Alongside his spiritual reforms, Hezekiah also prepared materially to defend Jerusalem. One of his most impressive achievements was the construction of the Siloam Tunnel. In 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20, we read, "As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and the tunnel by which he brought water into the city, Are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? This tunnel, carved through solid rock by two teams working from opposite ends, is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, ensuring Jerusalem's water supply even during a siege. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 5 to 8, we see additional defensive preparations. Then he worked hard, repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He built another wall outside that one and reinforced the terraces of the city of David. He also made large numbers of weapons and shields. He appointed military officers over the people and assembled them before him in the square at the city gate. Stockpiling supplies was also a priority. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 28, we read that he built storehouses for the harvest of grain, new wine and olive oil, and he made stalls for various kinds of cattle and pens for the flocks. However, the external political situation was complex. Despite the warnings of the prophet Isaiah, Judah sought alliances with other nations, especially Egypt. In Isaiah chapter 31, verses 1 and 3, the prophet warns, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and in the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. But the Egyptians are mere mortals and not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit." The rebellion against Assyria, though initially successful, brought severe consequences. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 7, we read, "And the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him." This decision, though courageous, led to Judah's growing isolation as other nations fell under Assyrian control. During all this turbulence, Hezekiah stood out as an exemplary leader. In 2 Chronicles chapter 31, verse 21, the Bible states, "In everything that he undertook in the service of God's temple and in obedience to the law and the commands, he sought his God and worked wholeheartedly, and so he prospered." The prophet Isaiah was a crucial support during this period. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 6, we read how he conveyed God's messages to the king. Isaiah said to them, "Tell your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of what you have heard, those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me." The mobilization of the people was remarkable. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 6 and 7, Hezekiah appointed military officers over the people and assembled them before him in the square at the city gate and encouraged them with these words, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater power with us than with him." Despite all pressures to surrender and adopt Assyrian customs, Hezekiah and the people remained steadfast in their faith. As 2 Chronicles chapter 32 verse 8 says, "With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles." Thus, as the Assyrian army advanced closer to Jerusalem, the people remained united under their king's leadership, who had prepared the city both spiritually and materially for the confrontation ahead. The moment everyone in Jerusalem feared finally arrived. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 17, the Bible tells us, "The king of Assyria sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem." The sight was terrifying. Thousands of professional soldiers, their armor gleaming in the sun, their siege machines ready to attack. The Assyrian army was far from disorganized. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 1, we read, "After all that Hezekiah had so faithfully done, Sennacherib king of Assyria came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, thinking to conquer them for himself. They established their camp strategically, surrounding Jerusalem to control all supply routes and avenues of escape. The Assyrians' first strategy was to establish a total blockade. As shown in Isaiah chapter 36 verse 2, they positioned themselves by the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. This was a crucial point for the city's water supply, demonstrating their detailed knowledge of Jerusalem's vulnerabilities. However, the real attack began with words, not weapons. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 19 to 20, the Rabshakeh, chief spokesperson for Sennacherib, launched a devastating campaign of psychological warfare. The chief officer said to them, "Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have strategy and military strength, but mere words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me?" The choice of language for these provocations was deliberate. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 26 and 28, when Hezekiah's officials asked the Rabshakeh to speak in Aramaic so that the people on the walls would not understand, he responded provocatively, "Was it only to your master and you that my master sent me to say these things, and not to the people sitting on the wall?" Then deliberately he raised his voice and called out in Hebrew. The Rabshakeh's speech was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 32 to 35, he sought to seduce the people with promises. "Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine and fig tree and drink water from your own cistern, until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life and not death." A comparison with other defeated gods was another tactic. As recorded in 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 33 and 34, the Rabshakeh argued, "Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they rescued Samaria from my hand?" The threats of deportation were explicit. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 32, he warned that those who resisted would be taken to a distant land. The people of Jerusalem were well aware of the fate of the 10 northern tribes deported years earlier to distant lands. Yet Jerusalem's response was remarkable. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 36, it says, "But the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded, 'Do not answer him.'" This silence was not a sign of weakness, but of discipline and obedience. Their confidence in the city's fortifications was well-founded. According to 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 5 and 6, Hezekiah had worked hard, repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He also built another wall outside that one. Preparations included stockpiles of food and, crucially, ensured access to water through the Siloam tunnel. Amid all this, the prophet Isaiah emerged as a voice of hope and courage. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 6, he conveyed God's message, "Do not be afraid of what you have heard, those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me." His presence was a constant reminder that despite appearances, God was in control. Isaiah's prophecies were specific and bold. In Isaiah chapter 37, verses 33 to 35, he declared, "This is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield or build a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, he will return. He will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of my servant David." The contrast with false prophets was evident. While some may have suggested surrender or trust in foreign alliances, Isaiah maintained a consistent message. Trust should be placed solely in the Lord. In Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15, he had already proclaimed, "This is what the sovereign Lord, the Holy One of Israel says, "In repentance and rest is your salvation, in quietness and trust is your strength." The people's spiritual preparation continued even during the siege. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 32, verses 7 and 8, Hezekiah encouraged them, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater power with us than with him. With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God, to help us and to fight our battles." Under immense pressure and continuous provocations from the enemy, Hezekiah made a decision that would change the course of history. With a heavy heart but full of faith, he went to the temple of the Lord, carrying a threatening letter from Sennacherib. The crisis reached its peak when Sennacherib sent a letter directly to Hezekiah. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 9 to 13, the Assyrian king sent messengers with a letter that openly challenged God's power. "Do not let the God you depend on deceive you when he says, 'Jerusalem will not be given into the hands of the king of Assyria.' Surely you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the countries, destroying them completely. And will you be delivered? Did the gods of the nations that were destroyed by my predecessors deliver them?" Hezekiah's reaction was extraordinary in its humility and faith. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 14, it states, "Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord." This symbolic act demonstrated total dependence on God. There was no war council, no meeting with generals. He went directly into the presence of the Lord. The prayer that followed became a model for all generations. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 15 to 19, we find his words, "Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God." The structure of this prayer is deeply significant. First, Hezekiah acknowledges who God is, the only true God, creator of all. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 16, he declares, "O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth." Next, he presents the problem with clarity and honesty. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 17 and 18, he admits, "It is true, Lord, that the kings of Assyria have laid waste these nations and their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone made by human hands." The most remarkable aspect of the prayer is that Hezekiah appeals not for his own honor or salvation, but for the honor of God. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 19, he pleads, "Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God." The divine response was immediate. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 21, we read, "Then Isaiah son of Amoz sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Because you have prayed to me concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word the Lord has spoken against him." The prophecies that followed were specific and bold. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 32 to 34, God promises, "Therefore this is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with a shield or build a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, he will return. He will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of my servant David." As an additional assurance, God offered a supernatural sign. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 29, Isaiah prophesies, "This will be the sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself, and in the second year what springs from that. But in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. The contrast with other nations that trusted in human alliances was striking. In Isaiah chapter 30, verses 1 to 3, we see the warning that had been given. Woe to the obstinate children, declares the Lord, who carry out plans that are not mine, who form an alliance, but not by my spirit, heaping sin upon sin, who go down to Egypt without consulting me, who look for help to Pharaoh's protection, to Egypt's shade for refuge. The example of Egypt was particularly relevant. In Isaiah chapter 31, verses 1 and 3, the prophet had warned, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and in the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. But the Egyptians are mere mortals and not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit." The fall of Samaria served as a grim reminder. In 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 5 and 6, it is recorded how the northern kingdom fell. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, marched against Samaria, and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. The failure of human diplomacy was evident everywhere. Nations that relied on military and political alliances had been conquered one after another. In 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 33 and 34, Rabshakeh himself mocked, "Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah?" But faith in Yahweh was different, as Hezekiah had declared in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, in verse 8, "With him is only an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles." Now, having presented his plea before the Lord and received the divine promise through Isaiah, all the people waited to see how God would intervene on their behalf. As Jerusalem waited in silent expectation, the heavens prepared for an unprecedented divine intervention. In the 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 35, the Bible reveals what was about to happen. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. The heavenly mobilization echoed other crucial moments in Israel's history. Just as in the Exodus, when in Exodus chapter 12, verse 23, we read that the Lord will pass through to strike down the Egyptians. Now another destroying angel was about to execute divine judgment. The nature of this warrior angel reminds us of 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 16, when David saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth, with a drawn sword in his hand extended over Jerusalem. The timing was significant during the night. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 36, the text emphasizes this detail. Then the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. The darkness of night serves as a somber parallel with the final plague in Egypt, when the angel of death also acted in the darkest hours. Divine justice in action was precise and devastating. As prophesied in 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 28, God had declared to Sennacherib, "Because of your rage against me, and because your insolence has reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will make you return by the way you came." The silence of that night must have been deafening. There were no battle cries, no trumpet sounds, no clashing swords. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 32, verse 21, we read simply, "And the Lord sent an angel, who annihilated all the fighting men and commanders and officers in the camp of the Assyrian king." The precision of the attack was supernatural. No soldier within the Assyrian camp had a chance to defend themselves. As promised in Isaiah chapter 31, verse 8, Assyria will fall by a sword that is not of man. A sword not of mortals will devour them. They will flee before the sword, and their young men will be put to forced labor. The supernatural terror of that night was absolute. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35, the magnitude of the destruction is clear: 185,000 men, a number representing nearly the entire elite Assyrian army that had besieged Jerusalem. It was not a partial defeat or a temporary setback, it was a total annihilation. When the sun rose the following morning, an unimaginable scene was revealed. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 36, the Bible describes the moment with shocking simplicity. When the people got up the next morning, there were only dead bodies. The Assyrian camp, which the day before was full of life and threats, had become a vast field of corpses. The ensuing panic was immediate. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 21, we read that Sennacherib returned in disgrace to his own land. The retreat was so disorderly and humiliating that the biblical text highlights it specifically. So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and from the hand of all others. He protected them on every side. The impact on neighboring nations was profound. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 23, we see that many brought offerings to the Lord in Jerusalem and valuable gifts to Hezekiah, king of Judah. From that day on, he was highly regarded by all nations. The historical evidence for this event is notable. Even the Assyrian records, though attempting to downplay the defeat, reveal an abrupt shift in Sennacherib's policy towards Judah. Sennacherib's prism, a significant archaeological discovery, mentions the siege of Jerusalem, but curiously does not proclaim its capture, an unusual omission for Assyrian records, which typically boasted in detail about their victories. The shift in Assyrian policy was dramatic. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 36 to 37, we read that, "Then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there." This marked a turning point in Assyrian ambitions. In the west, Jerusalem would remain the only capital to withstand the Assyrian Empire at its height. The Greek historian Herodotus, although writing centuries later with differing details, records a tradition of a supernatural disaster striking the Assyrian army in the region, indicating how the memory of this extraordinary event echoed through cultures and time. The historical legacy of this event was enduring. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 22-23, we read, "So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and from the hand of all others. He protected them on every side. Many brought offerings to the Lord in Jerusalem and valuable gifts to Hezekiah, king of Judah. From that day on, he was highly regarded by all nations." However, the event would not end there. Sennacherib's final fate was yet to come, and it would be as dramatic as his defeat at Jerusalem. The impact of divine intervention was immediate and profound. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 21, the Bible tells us, "Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned to his own land in disgrace. And when he entered the temple of his God, some of his own sons killed him with the sword." The Assyrian army's retreat was more than a simple military withdrawal. It was a humiliating flight that would forever mark the history of that empire. The scene after the Assyrian retreat must have been extraordinary. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 23, we read, "Many brought offerings to the Lord in Jerusalem and valuable gifts to Hezekiah, king of Judah. From that day on, he was highly regarded by all nations." The abandoned Assyrian camp certainly contained vast military and material riches left behind in the haste of their flight. The celebration in Jerusalem was grand, as revealed in Isaiah chapter 37, verses 31 and 32. Once more a remnant of the house of Judah will take root below and bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. The supernatural deliverance greatly strengthened the people's faith. The influence on neighboring nations was immediate. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 22, it is recorded, "So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and from the hand of all others. He protected them on every side." The God of Israel had demonstrated his power in a way no one could ignore. However, Sennacherib's fate would be even more dramatic. In 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 36 and 37, the narrative continues. "So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. One day, while he was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword, and they escaped to the land of Ararat. And his son Esarhaddon succeeded him as king. The years in Nineveh after his defeat were marked by palace intrigues and conspiracies. Isaiah's prophecy was fulfilled in every detail. In Isaiah chapter 37, verse 7, the prophet had declared, "I will put a spirit in him, so that when he hears a certain report, he will return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with the sword." The assassination of Sennacherib by his own sons in the temple of his god was the literal fulfillment of this prophecy. The transformation of Judah after these events was remarkable. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 27, we see that Hezekiah had very great riches and honor, and he made treasuries for his silver, gold, precious stones, spices, shields, and all kinds of valuables. The period that followed was one of great material and spiritual prosperity. The reforms initiated by Hezekiah continued with renewed vigor. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 26, we read that, "Then Hezekiah repented of the pride of his heart, as did the people of Jerusalem. Therefore the Lord's wrath did not come upon them during the days of Hezekiah. The people had learned a powerful lesson about humility and trust in God. The regional influence of Judah grew significantly. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 23, it is recorded that Hezekiah was highly regarded by all nations. This respect translated into positive alliances and beneficial cultural exchanges without compromising faith in Yahweh. The cultural development during this period was extraordinary. In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 1, we learn that the men of Hezekiah copied and preserved many of Solomon's proverbs, demonstrating an intellectual and literary revival during his reign. The spiritual strengthening was even more significant. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 8, Hezekiah's words echoed through the centuries. "With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles." This truth had been demonstrated unmistakably. The spiritual legacy of these events was preserved in various psalms. Although we cannot identify with absolute certainty which psalms were composed specifically about this deliverance, many scholars see echoes of this event in psalms that celebrate divine deliverance, such as Psalm 46, verses 1 and 2. "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea." The memory of this event remained alive in biblical literature. In 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 20, we read that King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah son of Amoz cried out in prayer to heaven. This partnership between the faithful king and the true prophet became a model for future generations. The story we have just seen is not just a record of the past. It is a living testimony of God's extraordinary power. In a single night, the most powerful empire of the ancient world, discovered that no human force can compare to the power of the God of Israel. 185,000 soldiers, a number that still amazes us today, fell before divine power. If this story touched your heart and brought you a new perspective on God's power in your life, share this video. Let others also discover how God can transform seemingly impossible situations. If you are not yet subscribed to the channel, this is the perfect moment to join our community. We have many more incredible stories like this to share, more extraordinary moments from the Bible to explore together. Activate the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos, where we will continue discovering the wonders of God's Word together. After all, the same God who defended Jerusalem that night is still alive and powerful today. See you in the next video, and remember, just as Hezekiah discovered, there is no situation too big for our God.